People who have met their online friends, what made you instantly regret it? I was 13 and had a 20-year-old pen pal in Hong Kong, both of us female. We met on Tumblr and emailed each other regularly. My parents' work said in all our correspondence, ABD we basically just talked about our cultures. About a year of us talking went by, and she said that her university allowed her to study abroad in Europe for a semester and she chose my country. Fun. I was excited. However, some time went by and our friendship kinda faded, to the point where I had forgotten she was even coming to my country. About 2 weeks before she was supposed to come, she emailed me that her student accommodation had to be cleaned out, so she couldn't access it on the night that she arrived. She needed a place to stay for one night. I asked my mom, and she agreed to pick her up from the airport with me, and she could stay with us for one night. I mean, we trusted this girl. I was very open about my friendship with her. We had pictures and everything. So 2 weeks later, we pick her up from the airport. And we didn't click. She kinda annoyed me, but it was late, and so we just went home. We get home and get her settled. We went up to my room. She gave me some presents, and we chat a little bit. She says thanks for letting me stay here this semester. Huh? Excuse me? This semester? I asked her, like, what do you mean? You can stay here tonight. We can see each other during the weekends if you want to hang out, but you can't stay here. She goes quiet. We go to sleep. At this point I just wanted her to go away. And I got what I wanted. The next morning I wake up, and she's gone. I don't even know how she got out, because we lock the doors at night, but she just vanished. We have special locks that you need a key for to open, and the key was somewhere else in the house. Yes, I think this is a fire hazard. No, my mom can't be convinced it's unnecessary. Her suitcase was still there. I tried calling her, she didn't pick up. She eventually texted me, asking if my mother could drop off her suitcase at a train station 40 minutes away at a certain time. My mother brought the suitcase, and that was that. Never seen her, or spoken to her again after that point. Update. Now that I think about it, I have a theory about why this went down like it did. She most likely put down my address on her visa application as her place of residency during her stay, and needed to stay in my house in case immigration was going to check if she was actually there. Also, for those wondering why she annoyed me, she treated my mother like a taxi driver, and she shot down everything I said to her. She was rude to me until she gave me the presents, after which she directly started talking about staying with me the whole semester. She didn't want to talk to me after I said that I had told her she could stay for one night on that exact date. I told her we could discuss it with my parents in the morning. Her and my English were both great, and we had discussed specific dates. I didn't put this in the original comment because I didn't think this would blow up like it did. And I'm not Irish, haha. It was my friend Kate who befriended this girl, Jessica, who allowed us to come and stay with her when we traveled to the US. Jessica was rude to me instantly and kept my friend away from me. I'd go upstairs and she'd find a reason for them to go downstairs. She had Kate share her bedroom and she'd lock the door for hours, and so I'd just go off and do my own thing. We met at 2 friends and they both ignored me. When it was time for Kate and I to move on to another state, Jessica insisted on coming with us. The lady we stayed with in another state, Robin, took no shit and called Jessica out on her strange behavior. Jessica proceeded to lock herself in a room and demanded Kate stay in there with her. They were in there all day and eventually Kate came out and said to me that there's something wrong with Jessica and she's actually scared. Kate and I, had plans to stay with another online friend, Matt, in another state, and Jessica demanded we cancel because she doesn't like or trust Matt. We said no, this is our holiday and we've paid for flights, and Jessica said then she will come with us, but we can't meet up with Matt. We said no, she cried. We left. Kate blocked her on everything. Kate's mother called us not long after saying Jessica contacted her crying, saying Kate is in danger, and we abandoned Jessica, and she's so concerned for my friend's safety. Edit to add, as I recall, she claimed to be concerned about Matt and basically wanted Kate's mum to tell us to stay with Jessica. It was actually incredibly scary. Kate found out later from another girl, Jane, they all knew each other from a forum, that Jessica had been telling everyone they were in love and had even slept together. I don't know how much of that is true, but I've known Kate for 20 years now, and she's never identified as anything but straight. She denied it 100%. Jessica was just obsessed with her, and months later Kate heard Jessica was telling everyone she was saving money to come to our country to find Kate. She never did, thankfully. Other than the time spent with this girl, we had a great holiday and made some good friends. I still talk to Matt, he's great. Edit, added fake names to make story a bit clearer as some people had trouble following. He got freakishly obsessive and possessive. Met online through a fandom. After a few years the fandom pretty much fell apart, but a handful of us stayed friends because we actually had a fair amount in common. D was very normal, the rest of the group seemed to love him. About 4 years after just being online mates we met in person. It went fine. We interacted a lot on FB and Instagram. I hit a really busy period in my life, but managed to squeeze in a Christmas get together at my place for my little group of friends including D. After that my online activity decreased drastically due to being busy, and when I managed to get on FB I noticed that most of the group were no longer friends with D. Weird, but whatever. I checked my messenger and saw message after message after message asking why I wasn't responding, what was I doing, could we arrange a meetup, etc. I explained I was super busy and it was also coming up to the anniversary of my mum's death, so just give me some time and we'll see about meeting up another time. He said, oh yeah, I forgot about the anniversary, you can have that day, but I expect a response after fact that. I blocked him, so he sent email after email after email asking me what is your faking problem, what the fuck do you think you're doing etc. So I blocked his email too. After 3 very peaceful weeks there was a knock on my door. It was D, and he had a 6-page letter detailing why we had to be friends. I shut the door, used an anonymous email thing to tell him if he contacted me again / showed up at my door I would call the police. Went on FB and told everyone, including the 2 remaining mutual friends, about it all, and could the mutuals not share anything about me / my life and actively discourage him from attempting to make contact. The friends who had long since unfriended him started messaging me that they stopped talking to him because of how creepy he was being in PMs about me, always asking if they knew what I was doing. Had I talked to them? Was I seeing anyone? Was I actually busy? Because he was convinced, wasn't, etc. In return I told them how he'd been trying to convince me to stop being friends with them because according to him they were all sorts of horrible things and that they were incredibly jealous and hated how close he and I were. I assumed he was just butthurt because they stopped talking to him, so was just making up a bunch of crap about these people who had always been perfectly nice to me. One incredibly weird occurrence just before this all happened was me telling a mutual on FB that I was heading to the aquarium in London with my daughter. Mutual friend was also in London that day with their daughter, and maybe we could grab a coffee / let the kids play in the park for a bit. I checked my messages later that evening and he was incredibly upset because he'd waited at Farringdon station exit for 2 hours so he could come to the aquarium too, and I didn't show up. We did not get off at that station, but one that was 2 stops after and closer to where we were going. I haven't heard a peep in over a year. He has apparently deleted his FB and Instagram and thankfully just disappeared. I have weird story about a lesbian I met online and eventually IRL. For reference, I'm a B-girl. We started talking after I made a comment on a lesbian forum about being a single lesbian mom. I still didn't know if I was bi or a lesbian at the time. We started messaging a lot. Hundreds of texts a day. This included sexting and trading nudes a lot too. But she was always obsessed with my daughter, like almost demanding pictures of her and updates on her. Eventually we arranged to meet up. When we finally see each other in person she looks shocked and asks where my daughter was being babysat by mom so we can have a date. I could tell this threw her off a bit. After our date we start hooking up at my place. Even then she was still asking about her. After this, can I meet her? Would you let me babysit? Do you think she'll start calling me mommy? I was like, chill, she's 1.5. This combined with her being obsessed with my daughter's stuff including stealing a pacifier, a dirty Onishi, going through the diaper pail, I decided this lady is crazy. She ended up stalking me for a while, but I was moving back in with my mom anyway, so I managed to escape. Not instant regret, but did make me realize things could have gone badly if this friend hadn't been a good human. I used to play Halo 2 with a guy, Molested Spartan. I always thought the name was hilarious, and he said it was what Xbox randomly assigned him when he let XBL choose his username. That has nothing to do with how the event went, just his naming case has on Reddit lol. We were playing Halo one day, and I made some off the wall comment about how bad traffic was due to them redoing one of our local roads, and he said his town was redoing a lot of roads too. I think I had a friend over or coming over, and I forgot to mute my mic, and said the road he lived on, asking when he had to leave / come over. Again, this was 15 years ago, a little fuzzy. Anyways, Molested Spartan was like, holy crap, do you live in Zis? And I told him yeah. Turns out he lived like 5 miles away from me on the other side of town. We met up. I was about 11 or 12 at the time. He was like 17, and he went and bought me a burger and milkshake while we chatted. Pretty cool dude from what I remember, but when I got home I thought about how different that could have been if he wasn't just some high schooler trying to make a kid's night with a burger and shake. Edit. Holy crap. Thanks for my first gold you / giraffe 70. Met her after gaming with her for like 1,5 years. My parents allowed me to have her visit me for a weekend. Unbelievably beautiful girl, had a lot of deep talks on the phone, were frequently flirting quite hard and stuff. She kind of was my first love interest. We went out for a drink with a few friends of mine. Started hitting on my best friend the second she saw him. Didn't even pay attention to me the whole evening, and the first thing she said the next morning was let's go to his place. That faking hurt. Edit. Alright, a few things. That was 10 years ago, give or take. I've made similar experiences over and over until I learned how to be more precise and direct about my feelings, especially towards love interests. Today, I'm a self-confident guy in his mid-20s that is very secure around people, so I guess things worked out for me. I stopped contacting her after that, while my best friend actually stayed close for quite some years, proceeding to have some strange kind of friends with benefits / love affair type situation going on with her. I don't blame him. She was a gorgeous girl, even though it bothered me first. We are best friends still, while she has vanished into nothingness at some point. As many refer to my best friend as a bad friend for not respecting my interest in said girl. He didn't flirt with her that evening at all. It was one-sided, really. Everything that happened between the two of them was afterwards. After I quit contacting her, he asked me if I was okay with him keeping contact, and I was, since my interest had poofed out of existence at this very evening. The amount of desperation on that girl had. Holy shit. First issue was she used a picture of herself when she was younger and thinner. She used to be around 120 pounds I believe she told me. She was easily over 300 pounds and couldn't walk for long. Eventually she took out a cane. I didn't know how to react to a 21-year-old using a cane. Someone that injured? Sure. Someone that spent 90% of their time watching YouTube and reading animes. Not fine. We walked, sat, walked, sat, walked, sat, talked for a bit. She warned me she has anger issues and might snap at me at any random time. She would constantly look at her phone and sigh loudly. We met up basically on a date to see a movie. When watching the movie she would constantly burp and fart during every romantic scene. She would cheer herself on every time too. In the faking theater after the date was over, I didn't want to see her again, but apparently I left a good impression. She would call me constantly every night. Usually crying about how much she hates where she lives, how much she hates, why she can't leave, etc. etc. She wanted a relationship to rescue her from there. Life would be better if she had a boyfriend and just did her own thing. The only jobs she had were at fast food places. Those didn't last long. Each 1 to 3 months at most. She constantly smelled like fish. She dropped out of college because, in her words, I couldn't stand the stuck-up people there. They really made it unbearable. Also, she does not like studying. After a while she stopped contacting me. I believe that she had taken the hint and backed off. In reality she went to another guy who is basically the literal definition of 4chan soy boy, though much worse. He can barely keep down a job, he can barely maintain himself, he drinks himself silly, and she is just happy to be away from her family. She started contacting me again begging me to save her from him, and I'm like, I have a girlfriend now. Bye. She left a 16-page Facebook rant. Haven't heard from her since. I used to draw a lot on /x/ and generally browse 4chan. I was going through a lot of depression, and I felt alienated from friends and family, as well as the death of a long relationship. Somehow just talking to other people about the most mundane stuff felt so amazing. I was in a few Skype groups. We would chat about life, play online games and stuff. One couple was nice and the guy was trying to quit smoking. Another guy just got a promotion at work. You know, real people with life. They all were far away. Until I get this email. I was going to delete it because it seemed weird, but I read it. It was a case of mistaken identity. He thought I was this person who also did modeling / cosplay or something because of my email name. I corresponded and corrected them, but we just kept talking. He also loved paranormal stuff, was into films, and writing too. And close by. After a month or so of daily talks and texts we wanted to hang out. Between all this I was moving out and in a bad spot emotionally, but he was very nice and talked me through anxious parts. I met him and sparks flew. No, actually I couldn't look him in the eyes and got sweaty because I realized how cute he was and how much I felt like an idiot. We did kiss, and as cliche as it sounds, it felt like when Dorothy entered Oz, my life had color again. Anyway, it ended well because we're getting married this year. So this one really changed my life. So for context, I live in Ireland and my friend lived in Scotland. I met this guy on Sparks when I was like 14 and he's 16 back in 2012. Got to know each other super well and talked every day and played Halo and Mass Effect 3 together. We did this for 3 years and I would have considered him one of my best friends at the time. But I'd never met him. I knew all about his life. I'd spoken to some of his family before. So I was known by some of his IRL friends too. In year 4 his 360 died, so then he got us Xbox One, and I got a PS4. Because of consoles we stopped talking a lot. We would catch up every now and then on Facebook and whatnot. This all changed in 2017 when he got engaged to a girl I remember him dating when we were talking. A few weeks later I start getting messages about the wedding. He contacted me to be one of his groomsmen. Now 16-year-old me made a promise that I'd go to his wedding. So I said yeah, sure, of course. I had just faked myself. He later told me the wedding was in the US, which means I had to start saving to go. Let's skip to 2018. I fly out to the US for the wedding and I get to the hotel everyone is staying at. I text the groom and ask where everyone is. They are out for food. So I go get a cab and follow out to them. I walk into the restaurant. He very quickly spotted me and ran over, called out my old gamer tag and hugged me. I didn't realize how small he was. I'm only 6'1". I expected him to be taller. But after that night I found out that without something to focus on, video games, he could actually be a little bit annoying, and I had just committed to being stuck in a mansion for 4 days after this. At the time I was in a 2-year-long relationship with someone who wasn't making me happy. At the wedding I met one of the groom women. There were 2 girls and 3 guys, and instantly we clicked. We both also slagged the groom, so kinda bonded on that. We just got on super well, and we decided to hang out the whole wedding. She was also in a relationship. One of the nights we kissed, and after that I knew it was over with my now ex. After the wedding and me and her were flying out on the same day and we were in the same terminal. We had a nice goodbye. I got home and broke it off with my ex. That night the girl from the wedding got dumped. We saw each other on off for a month or 2 and after that we started to get serious. I'm still with her and it's the happiest I've ever been with someone. Guy I met on an Neopets fan site. Shut up. When I was 12 to 13. The site ended up going down, but a bunch of us stayed in touch on DeviantArt. Shut up. And MSN Messenger. It was the early 2000s. Okay, never met him in person, but I would stay up all night online during the summer and chat with people on MSN. I knew some of the people from the old Neopets fan site were older teenagers, and that this dude was actual adult. Can't remember how old exactly, maybe 22-30. But he'd been pretty cool up to now. In the year or two I'd known him, suddenly he wanted me to send him a picture of myself to know what I looked like. I wasn't cool with that, so I sent him a drawing from my DeviantArt. Shut up. He said something along the lines of it wasn't good enough, and he wanted to see what I actually looked like. I remember expressing I wasn't comfortable with that, but he kept pushing back and insisting on it. I said something like, "If you were my friend you wouldn't keep asking," and he replied with something like, "I knew you'd say something like that." Little Red Maiden Stranger Danger Sense started going off, and I eventually just blocked him and lost touch completely. Dozer, if you're reading this, dude, you were mega creepy and gave off Beto vibes on mobile, so forgive me for any weird formatting. I, F22, had a friend, M26, online for 11 years before we met. I'm Canadian, he's American. We met on a RP site when we were quite literally still kids and were a massive part of one another's lives, especially during our teenage years. We spoke every day through text, on the phone, had each other on social media. We even knew and sometimes spoke to each other's family and friends in real life. He called me his light and his sister, and I called him my brother. We were family. It would take a whole novel to explain our 11-year friendship and what we have been through together, but I'll just try to make it short by saying he had a very shitty and unstable life and a lot of mental health problems. He was a narcissist. I spent many years being his emotional crutch and punching bag, helping him find jobs, being there for his breakdowns. I never broke off the friendship because after all those years, I kind of felt responsible for him. Anyways, last year we finally decided to meet. We were both grown adults and saved money to go on a 10-day trip to a dream destination of mine in the States. I knew this likely would not go well. I knew he was a narcissist, but I just had to meet him. I had to meet my brother, the guy that was there for over a decade. I needed to see him face to face. On this trip he abandoned me on a mountain during a hike because he decided he wanted weed. When he came back I was obviously mad and wanted to go back to our hotel, but he told me to wait for him in the car while he did the hike on his own. I took an Uber home and he returned as well 4 hours later. Automatically assumed I'd shell out $300 for him to buy a laptop he wanted without asking me. Just brought me to the store to look around while we waited for our movie to start at the theater and sprung it on me. I refused. Was overall inconsiderate. We only ate at places where he wanted to eat, when he wanted to eat. Only did things he wanted to do and not me, despite the trip being my idea. I missed out on a lot because he just wanted to sit around and do nothing. And so much more. What hurt the most is when I confronted him about it. He told me, "You're not my girlfriend. I don't need your approval or need to change for you to like me." I cut the friendship off and blocked him. When we return home, I also plan on retaking my dream trip one day and doing it properly this time. Met a fellow 7th grader on Xbox, and we were pretty great friends. Even after I quit playing Xbox, we still kept in touch. He only lived 2 towns over, but it was right on the edge of where my parents would drive me. So high school graduation, I finally made it out to see him for the first time. We were having fun until I asked him, "Hey, is blank coming?" Blank was a middle school girlfriend he had that we talk about a lot because I'd third wheel a lot of Xbox live parties with them, and we had a bit of inside jokes. Him and his friends Winston chuckled, kind of the awkward reaction I was aiming for. Then I pieced together from old memories that the other dude in his friend group used to date her too, and how they'd gloat about being Eskimo brothers, so he'd probably remember who I was from Xbox as well. After a few more jokes, my friend leans in on me and goes, "Hey, I know you're not from around the area or nothing, but she died in a car accident a few months ago." I immediately shut up and left. They told me they were fine with it all and we should hang out again, but when you're making explicit jokes about someone whose obituary stated they played piano for the church and consecutive years on honor roll, you don't really want to go back round those there parts. Nightmare week. When I was 13 I met this girl online and we got really close. She lived in the south of the country and I lived in the center. Portugal for reference. Everything was fine. We liked the same bands and were both just teenage fangirls. We became really close and wanted to meet. Now, my 13-year-old brain did not see all the red flags. First, she became really possessive over me. I couldn't speak with any of my other online friends without her knowing. She would go through my Facebook and Tumblr to see what I was doing, and she was really jealous every time my family bought me anything as her mom couldn't afford it. We eventually got over the band we liked, and she introduced to another band which I started to love and read fanfics about. Big mistake. She started trying to get onto my Tumblr likes and my Wattpad and YouTube history just so she could see if I was looking, reading, or watching anything related to them, and if I was, she would go off on me and say she saw them first and they were hers and I had no right to like them or even read fanfics about them. I got all my accounts private and hid my likes from her. Even after all of this, we were best friends and I wanted to meet her. So one of my mom's friends that worked at the place she lived took me there and we finally met. I was going to stay for 2 weeks and go up with my mom's friend again later on. When I got there, the first few days were amazing. We were really close and loved being with each other. Then she started treating me like shit, ignoring me and wanting me to sleep in her little sister's room and be out of her room for once. I didn't get why, and I tried to confront her about it, and she said sorry and everything was fine for a day. Her mom was barely home and treated her like shit. There was barely any food at home and sometimes the most I would eat in a day would be a sandwich. She started again being very cold and very beachy and aggressive, and I decided I had enough and I wanted to go home. Of course, I called my mother crying saying I was done and I couldn't stay for another week. Well, her friend that was supposed to pick me up in a week couldn't do it anymore and I would have to stay 2 more weeks. I had absolutely enough and I said I couldn't care less and decided I would get a bus home and just leave this place as I was going insane. The day before my trip home, I dropped my phone in the toilet and the next day it didn't work. I was 13 traveling by myself for 5 hours and doing something I have never done before. I packed my stuff the next day and went. I was alone on the bus, hungry as fuck, no money, no sleep and no way to contact my mother. I got a bus directly to the capital of the country, which is where I was supposed to wait and catch another bus home. I got out and realized my bus was 3 hours away and I had already traveled 3 hours. So I sat down on the floor and cried my eyes out. I felt tired and defeated as well as stuffed because I didn't eat dinner last night nor breakfast or lunch that morning. My phone didn't work either, so I just had to wait. Lucky for me, one of the buses that went home was early, but it wasn't my bus. I showed my ticket to the bus driver and he told me this bus was not correct and I had to wait. But when he looked at me, he said to get in and he would take me anyway. I'm still grateful to this man to this day and I'll never forget the look of pity he gave me when he saw me. When I got to the bus station, my parents weren't there yet, so with the little change I had, I went to a payphone and called them. They were close, so I just waited. When my mom arrived, I ran to her and cried so much in her arms. At the end, I lost 10 pounds during that week and I swore never again. We talked for a few months until I blocked her on everything as I couldn't deal with her jealousy and envy anymore, so I shut her out. We didn't speak for more than 2 years and then she contacted me with a huge paragraph saying sorry she was mean. We occasionally speak and I follow her on Instagram. Though, she stalked me to a uni in England and to the same course, which I found extremely creepy. Luckily, I had changed uni by then as I didn't like that one and didn't see her again. She ended up dropping out and going to Portugal again. She is still envious and self-obsessed. At this point I only follow her cause it gives me peace that I grew up and matured. 6 years later, she kept some of my clothes I forgot at hers and never told me I left them behind. I noticed when I saw pictures of her and her sister wearing my clothes on their Instagram stories. This story took place over a decade ago, when I was a senior in high school. Some of the details are a little fuzzy. I met a girl who blogged on the same site I did. Let's call her Sarah. We were the same age, but she lived in a nearby town and went to a different high school. We had been talking online for a month or two and then decided to watch a movie at her place. The date was awkward, but not awful. We kissed, nothing more. However, I could tell that she was more into it than I was. I didn't want a relationship, and she definitely did. We had already talked about this, so when she broached the topic of a relationship a few days later, I told her that I had fun on our date and I liked her, but still felt the same. I didn't want to get into a relationship before I left for college. She appeared to understand and took it okay. Online, I knew she was disappointed, and I really felt bad for her because I knew how that felt, but she said she agreed with me and wanted to do the same thing. We were the same age. I still think I made the right call. That's when things got weird. One night a few weeks later, I was sitting outside a coffee shop in a crowded shopping center when an SUV pulls into the parking lot going about 45 miles per hour. Just absolutely flying. It was really dangerous. The SUV drives past me sitting outside the coffee shop, window rolled down, and I see Sarah in the backseat holding a plastic red Solo cup. I hadn't told her I would be there, but it was one of my regular hangout spots, so she likely knew to look for me there. "Fuck your dick," she screams at me as they pass, and she throws the cup out the window. It hits the sidewalk in front of me, and I can smell that it's full of booze. They haul ass around the parking lot and come back for another pass. I'm gathering my things to go inside at this point, but she continues to hurl insults at me from the window as her friends drive her around. I don't remember exactly what happened after that, but I basically stayed inside until the SUV left, and then I drove back home to my parents' house for the night. Then at about 2 AM, my dad comes into my room. I was asleep. School night. There's someone out on the front lawn. They're screaming your name. It turns out Sarah had figured out where I lived. Maybe they followed me home, and her drunk awful friends had driven her over to my parents' house at midnight on a school night and just left her there. She was laying on her back out on the lawn, screaming at the top of her lungs, "I hate you, nosebleed. Fuck your dick." Such a strange insult that no one has ever said to me since. My dad got her some water and helped her to her feet. He contacted her folks and drove her to an all-night diner where they picked her up. I don't remember the details of our follow-up conversations. I remember that she apologized and felt embarrassed, but it was also clear she had an unhealthy attachment to me. To be honest, I wasn't very nice to her after that. I told her politely but firmly that I didn't want her in my life. Cut to freshman year of college, 4 hours away from my hometown. Who do I see on campus but Sarah? She'd never mentioned she was interested in this college, and she knew I was going there. Fortunately for both of us, that is where the story ends. I never did learn if she followed me there, or if it was just a coincidence. I didn't see her much at college. We had different friend groups and she did her own thing mostly. She might have messaged me once or twice, but I didn't reply, and eventually, she quit contacting me. The funniest thing is, I spent about an hour reading through all the responses on this thread, thinking to myself, man, I don't have any crazy stories like that. I had totally forgotten about this incident until a voice, somewhere in the deep dark recesses of my memory, called out to me in a harsh whisper, "Fuck your dick." So I was in a Discord chat of a bunch of random people. I met a guy who was only 2 years older than me and lived in my state. We started talking for a while and we got super close. We both wanted to meet up, and it turned out we were both going to go to the same cosplay convention. We were excited, but then he says, "My brother is gonna come too. I told him about you, and he thinks you seem cool." I was okay with it at the time. Now, I didn't regret meeting up with my friend. We are actually still super close to this day. I regretted meeting his brother. We both drove to the hotel and met up there. We found our room and I plugged my Nintendo Switch into the TV so we can play Mario Kart. Now here is where the creepiness begins. I choose Rosalina, and his brother says, "Of course you would pick the sexiest character." I just kind of awkwardly chuckled and continued playing. He continued to say weird flirty things the rest of the night. The next day we went to the con, and I was dressed as a Mimikyu from Pokemon. My friend was Pikachu, and his brother was a Team Skull Grunt. We had a lot of fun, but the brother kept getting real close and putting his hands on my shoulders and shit like that. Then he throws a pokeball at me. I played along, and it was pretty funny, but he says afterwards, "You're my Pokemon, so you do me favors from now on." and slapped me hard on the ass. I noped out of there and tracked down my friend, who was at one of the seller's booths. I told him everything, and he just confronted his brother, who proceeded to walk around the con by himself. I still meet up with my friend, but he comes to my house, so I don't have to see his brother. Sorry this was long.